All right, so what is Firebase App Check? Firebase App Check is a security service provided by Google for Firebase. It's both a mobile and web application development platform. App Check is designed to protect your Firebase project. This is tough to read through from abuse such as fraudulent access, spam, and other malicious behavior. So the interesting piece on all of this, you're probably wondering, how does this fit in with Firebase authentication? They're kind of partners in a way. So Firebase App Check is going to check your application, whether it be mobile or web-based. The second access to that is when you're authenticating users. That's kind of the true backend side to this. So just keep that in mind if that's one of your questions as we go along. From an app check with the different methods, the one that we'll be focused on tonight is reCAPTCHA, since it's the web version of it. So attestation, huge word. I'm not big on huge words that don't make sense. Basically, all this, it does make sense if you know the word, but what the heck is it? It's an official verification of something as true or authentic. So you might get legal documents and things that have attestation attached to them. This is the same kind of meaning. They need to know that your website is who you say you are and where you say you are. So that's kind of the key to that. Apple has Device Check to do its attestation. That's a provider that they have. Android has Play Integrity, and web, of course, which we'll be talking about tonight, is reCAPTCHA. So how does it work? One, your app interacts with the provider of your choice, those providers that we just showed, to obtain an attestation for the app or device's authenticity. Attestation is sent to the App Check server, which verifies the validity of attestation using parameters registered with the app. We're going to walk through all of that, so don't freak out if this isn't making sense at all. This token might retain some information about the attestation material verified. The App Check client SDK caches the token in your app, and it's ready to be sent along with any requests made to protected services. So these are the services that are protected by App Check: real-time database, cloud Firestore, cloud storage, and callable cloud functions. So there are a lot of other cloud functions that you can use out on Firebase. These are the ones that are being called from the client directly up to it. So it's different than just hitting a cloud endpoint out there. It has no way to associate that token. So all of that, I love pictures, and this is like how I will always remember this. If you're colorblind, I apologize. So I'll try to say like top and bottom, but on the top is a green line. This is the happy path, a valid request. As you can see, it's coming into our backend application and it hits App Check. App Check is solid and it checks that, and it passes that through to any services that might be underneath, including in this diagram, because this is what we'll be showing off, is Firestore. Now, a bad request or a malicious request on the bottom comes through and hits App Check, and it stops right there. It doesn't even get, if you're used to Firebase and Firestore rules or real-time database rules or any of those, it doesn't even get to those rule checks. It immediately says, nope, your token's not good, or your domain you're coming from is not good, whatever that attestation might be, and it kicks you back out. So that's kind of how that App Check works. I don't think I included it in here, but I believe at this time, it's 1 million requests are free for your attestation check or your app check. So I think it's 1 million a month. So the piece that we're talking about tonight from the web side of things, you may have seen reCAPTCHA before. We're going to be talking about reCAPTCHA version 3 tonight. This thing on the left, I'm sure you've all used at some point or another, where you have to click the box to say I'm not a robot, and when it doesn't believe you, or if it right off the bat doesn't believe you, it throws up a picture and you got to do the I can't find street lights for the life of me, this is really bad, and finally you can get in. So on like version 2, which is this. This is an example which requires some user interaction. Version 3 does not require user interaction. So version 3 allows you to verify if an interaction is legitimate without any user interaction. It's pure JavaScript API returning a score, giving you the ability to take action in the context of your site. So for instance, requiring additional factors of authentication, sending a post to moderation, or throttling bots. And that's a really big key. The bot one is probably the biggest thing that App Check prevents going through this. So we're going to write a demo application in Firebase somewhat from scratch and then kind of deploy it out and see how that works. So I'll do a new window in VS Code and we'll pop open the terminal. So I'm just going to make a new directory called webdev-gr-2 because I tried this example earlier just to make sure it would work. CD into it. And the first thing that we're going to do, we're just going to set up a very simple Svelte site, not Svelte kit. I chose to kind of go that direction just to make a few things easier. So we'll do pm create. So we're going to call this webdev-gr-2, and we're going to pick Svelte for now. So hopefully everyone can see this okay. If not, let me know and I can bump up the font out here. So I'm going to go ahead and open. What am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and open this. So we have a basic setup for a Svelte application, for a Vite application that is using Svelte. So in here we have a source folder, and the main content in here, if you've never used this before, it's got a app.svelte. The load that actually comes from this is index.html. Once this all gets built out, we'll have a dist folder at the end of it that we can then deploy to hosting. So the first thing that we want to do here is set up Firebase as well. Actually, let me show you the application just so everyone believes me that we have one. I'm going to go ahead and do a get init as well, just so that we have our changes as we're going along. And I'll just do init in case we see something. And now that we have this, I'll do pm run dev. So this is the current site that we have. Very simple Vite plus Svelte site out here. You can click this count button. What this is representing is just another component. So we have a component out here in our library called counter. We'll end up changing this around a little bit as we keep going, so we can include Firestore into that counter piece of it. So now we're just going to do Firebase. So this requires the first one really didn't require anything but npm or pm in our case. This second one, we're going to do a Firebase init just to set up a Firebase project as well. Let me move this up a little more. So the two things that we're going to look at is Firestore and hosting into this project. And we'll create a new project. So let's just call it web dev. Okay, I won't touch it this time. I promise.
But now I know what that might do.
Yeah. So technically, what it does is Firebase sits on top of Google Cloud, and Google Cloud Projects is the core of everything out in Google Cloud. So it's actually creating that cloud project, which I'd have to go delete and mess with. And then Firebase gets added to that project afterwards. And I don't know why they haven't fixed this for the many years I've been doing this. But if you add Firestore to your project like this, it still is not initiating it correctly. So when you come out here to Firestore, let's move some of this stuff around, sorry. We'll go ahead and create our database in webdev-gr-3. We're going to create this in production mode and just add one single document to match, or collection rather. So we'll jump back over. If you see errors like that, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. You'll notice that in our folder, we actually haven't gotten any updates. So we're going to do that Firebase init one more time. And we'll do Firestore and hosting. This time we're going to use an existing project now that we have it all set up. And we'll pick webdev-gr-3. I wish I could show this a little better for those who are here. Let me do this at least. Hopefully you can see it a little better. So we're going to add Firebase Firestore rules. Those are going to be very simple rules. It's just going to initialize a production database, which keeps everything closed, so it's not open to the public to get into. We won't use any indexes, but we'll create the file anyways. For our example, because Vite actually puts it out to a dist folder, we're going to say dist here. This probably won't matter because we're only going to use a single page, and then we're not going to set up automatic builds, but this is a great way. If you have a project that you're setting up and you're regularly like pushing to it, it'll trigger off GitHub automatically now. So if you use Vercel or Netlify or anything like that, this is kind of that solution as well on the Firebase side. So you'll see we have our projects in our Firebase RC file. In our Firebase JSON, we have where we're hosting from, which is that dist folder. And then our Firestore rules, it's all locked down. And something cool that they added, it's been a few years now, is this request.time. They actually shut off Firestore access. I thought it was 7 days, but it looks like it's like 30 days from the time of creation. So if you don't adjust this, that database will go closed in 30 days, which is awesome. Again, they had too many things open in the very beginning of all this. It was kind of a mess. Okay, so we've added Firebase. We're going to do our first deployment out to the hosting. So we'll just do Firebase, we'll do pnpm run build. And for anyone that is looking for what that actually is doing, if I come over to our package.json, you'll see it's just running Vite build here. So at that point, we have our dist folder all set up to go for a build, and we'll do Firebase deploy. We'll just do deploy everything right now, and it'll actually deploy out our Firestore rules as well. In the future, we'll probably just do a deploy hosting from there on out as we update things. So if we take a look, this final URL down here is webdev-gr-3.web.app. We can open that up, and now we have a public app. Good to go. So we're all hosted and running. What we're going to do with this now is a couple steps to make App Check actually work. So if I jump back into our webdev-gr3, we're going to then go to build an App Check. App Check hasn't been initialized here yet, so it's got a few things like how to get started and easy tasks like that to go through App Check. But luckily, I'm going to walk you through all of these. It's going to be great. So you'll notice if I go into App Check right now, there aren't any apps currently. So we haven't set up Firebase in our actual application yet. So the first thing that we're going to do is go to project settings, and there's no apps here. You'll notice there's iOS, Android, web, Unity, and Flutter. The Unity and Flutter, I don't believe have App Check. Last I checked, I hope Flutter is coming soon from what I hear. The website is what we're after though. So webdev-gr-3 or 2 or whatever we're on now. So once this is set up, we can actually copy this exact configuration. There's so many different versions of this typically that depending on how you pnpm install or like get your configuration file, this will all differ, but it's pretty straightforward, luckily, for Svelte. So I'm going to come back over here, and before I forget, I'm actually going to do pnpm install. I'll do the full command. Firebase. Our Wi-Fi is good. It's fantastic. Now, if I jump back into app.svelte, where everything starts off with, we're going to just include or import our firebase.app. I have no idea why this is complaining right now. Not gonna worry about it. Yeah. Gonna run it a few times. It'll come out right. So we drop that in, and then we're going to initialize our application. So now that we have Firebase set up, we have this app ID, and that application ID is what we can use to correspond with App Check. So if we finish this up, we can come back into App Check, and now you'll actually see that there is a web application. There's two options, which might be hard for you to see again. Let me bump that up a little bit. So there's two options in here. There's reCAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA Enterprise. reCAPTCHA Enterprise adds a lot of nice things to the toolkit, but for most applications, if you're just looking for that base setting for App Check, it really goes a long ways. A lot of the limits and things like that go up in the enterprise version, but then you're obviously paying for a lot. So at this point, we can start to tie in reCAPTCHA and Firebase together. So the reCAPTCHA site is one of the most difficult sites I've found to get to the admin section. So if you look around on all of this and getting started, it's very much a sales page. Here's kind of what comes with Enterprise and reCAPTCHA 3. Some of this I've heard. I haven't checked this out, but the ML model tuning API is pretty sweet on the enterprise version. So if you want to learn more, just email me and I'll dig in and find it out for you. But with all of that said, I can never find where to go in here. So it's reCAPTCHA/admin. That'll get you to the admin section of this. So in our reCAPTCHA setup, we're going to create a new site. We're going to call it WebDevGR3. This is where that version 2 or version 3 you can utilize. I do have a setup for version 2 if anyone's curious. We can take a peek at it later. For 3 though, we need to go back to that domain that we were hosting. So if you've never used Firebase before, you can always type in Firebase sites list. And this will give you all of the different sites that you have set up. The one that we are after, of course, is ours that's out in production already. So we're going to take that into reCAPTCHA and add that as our domain. So the only domain that this app currently will work on is webdevgr-3.web.app. Everything else would be off of the app check, and it will say, nope, this is an invalid request and block it. And we'll walk through some of that and how it works. So after we have that set up, it gives us our two keys, our site key, which is public facing, and that will go in our application, and then our secret key. So the thing that we need right now is our secret key. We'll go back into Firebase console where we had that open, and just in case that was too many hops, I'll back up a little bit. So we're Firebase check, apps. Here's our WebDevGR that we have set up. And then in reCAPTCHA, I'm just going to put that secret key in. Do not expose this out like I am in this tutorial. That will involve reason to have this basically. So the token setup we'll talk about, we re-verify that in our JavaScript each time, so you don't have to worry about it. So at this point, I'm going to save. And it should tell me in my APIs that the Cloud Firestore is currently unenforced, which is great news. Now we're going to include some things that I kind of pre-built so we can start to see Firestore get hit by this front-end application. So instead of writing all new components, we're just going to take the two I have over here and walk through them. So this is our basic counter that we are going to replace with a new counter that actually ties into Firestore. So currently we are importing counter. We also need counter reader. So let's copy that and do counter reader. And that's all it takes in Svelte to import a Svelte component. And then we'll bring in the component down here. For both of these components, it's erroring because in each one of them, we are doing something with Firebase. So Firestore specifically. So in the application here, we're using Firestore. And we're going to set up our collection at db at counts. So it's /counts is our initial collection, but we need to be able to pass this app into that component. So the way you do that in Svelte is just to say export let app, and you can pass that prop into Svelte. So it's very similar to React if you've ever used that in that fashion. So we're just going to do that and pass an app. And again, if we haven't seen where that's coming from, that's after our initialization of Firebase, we passed in app. So now if we run our development environment again, I'll just do pm run dev. We'll jump out to this. You'll see it has last 5 here. I'm forgetting something already. I just realized it. We need to allow Firestore access. So currently in Firestore, in here, we actually have it locked down for the 30 days and nothing can read it currently. We have to allow a document to be added to it. So I'm just going to steal this so I don't have to write it all out. So I'm actually going to fully lock this except for one collection. I'm just going to copy this whole thing. So this is essentially saying in my databases for Firestore, at any document location, lock it. However, it then goes on to say another match is counts collection. You can read and write to counts at will. So this is part of that app check, which is nice because technically at this point, anyone writing this reading or writing to this application has access. However, if you are hitting it now from an API or a location that we enforce, it can't get into it. Now, that's by no means a good check. App check won't grab everything. So this is still an unsecure way of doing things. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. There's better ways to set this up. But if you're doing something like, let's say, a blog, you'd want to put admin rights in another way, another fashion to add documents in. And then your like counts in this case, or a blog, you would set to read any. So read true. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now we're going to actually deploy both of these changes. Actually, let me deploy Firestore first. So Firebase deploy only Firestore. It's got this weird double dash feature. And now if I go back up to our Firestore instance or backend, and I go into Firestore database, you'll see in our rules tab here that I've updated to include counts now. So now I'll run this locally, pm dev. And at this point, if I start to click counts, you'll actually see documents being created in the backend. So if I come over to our backend data here, every one of these counts is a new document in our Firestore database. And it's just keeping in sync real time with that backend. Please ignore the counts. I couldn't think of anything more clever to get us started real quick. The count will reset anytime we like refresh. So it's not going to keep that number, but trust me, that's what's going on. Okay, so we have Firebase set up, we have Firestore set up, we're writing to it, we're reading from it. We can deploy this version of it now, and it wouldn't be enforced quite yet. So what we have to do is say app check. We can go look at our Cloud Firestore. You'll notice here that 100% of these requests currently are unverified. And that's entirely because we haven't included app check yet. So what I'm going to do is actually click this enforce button. And this is what takes a while. So we'll see how demo goes. We might have to take a look at my pre-built one, but It could take up to 15 minutes for this enforcing to start to occur. So we'll actually, we'll see how this goes. We'll put them down here, keep them together just like I did. So on this import, what we're bringing in are two things: the initialize of check, and this is with the new modular version v9 and above of Firebase. So we have to pass in the app to this app check function, and then the second piece of that is that provider. So if you remember that attestation that we were talking about, how we have Apple and Google and web, this is saying use the reCAPTCHA v3 provider, and we'll drop in our new ID. So the ID that we're putting in here from reCAPTCHA, which I probably closed at some point. So on our WebDev GR3, we've already taken the reCAPTCHA keys for, again, don't show people these. We've already taken the secret key into our backend and said, okay, this needs to match what site key you're going to pass in. So again, I'm copying that site key and I'm putting it right here so that when we initialize this now, it will actually correctly do the app check run through. So this front end ID, if you will, or site key will have to match the secret key that is in this backend here for our apps. So that key right there is where you put that secret key. Now that we have everything, we should start to see different results happening. So I'm going to save this. Let's go ahead and build this and deploy this out. So we have this built. And then we'll do, oh my gosh, Firebase deploy only hosting. So now we should have our new version of the web app up here. So this should start to show in our backend that we have a new app check. It's not quite yet there. So this takes time. So it should come in as a verified request after a while. Just gonna do a hard refresh and hopefully play around with this a little bit. Firestore coming in. Let's see. So we'll have to keep bouncing in there and check it out, but that is essentially how that verification request comes in. So this is when I'm going to bounce over to kind of the pre-canned example to show you what's going on, because I'm not sure how long this will end up taking, but we can come back to it. Okay, so this in the other example that I wrote a couple days ago is the app check verified version. Now, if I look in my backend for this, which is this one, you'll start to see that the enforced was checked and the verified request coming in is 88%. So the unverified invalid requests are getting failed out. So anything on a different web page that doesn't have the correct domain and ID are going to get bounced out. So there's two examples of that I have on here. One example is this one, and you'll notice the URL changed to with, and all of that is saying is this still has the API key or the reCAPTCHA key in it, but it's on the wrong domain. So this is probably the most typical version of this that you'll see. You'll see somebody like try to clone your code and just run it on their own site, right? This is preventing that now. Whereas any other time, there's not a whole lot of good ways to prevent that in happening on Firebase on the front end. So that's the first version. The second version is one with completely without an app check, which won't run at all. The difficult part with both of these versions is in development and kind of your CI/CD pipelines at this point is how do you start to get around this? Well, they've provided a pretty easy solution for that. So I'm going to run pm run dev for our version that we wrote live. And when I run that in localhost, it comes in and says missing or insufficient permissions. Same thing that we were seeing when it was on a site that you could not utilize. That's a real bummer for devs trying to debug this thing. So what we need to include, which oh, there it is this statement above it. So up above here, or anywhere that makes sense, but this made the most sense for me. I'm going to say, if we're in development mode, go ahead and put the Firebase App Check debug token just on the itself on the window. When I do this, we should now see, sorry, I'm bouncing around a lot. In our console, here's an app check debug token. Again, you do not want to give this to people. This is going to be a secret thing. So I'm going to take and copy this. I'm going to go back into Firebase, App Check, WebDevGR3. I'm going to manage my debug tokens. So this is the way that you can get around this. And this is why you want to keep it secret too. So I'll just say Alex's token or whatever. And paste that in. So it says right here, this token value won't be shown again, copy it, blah, blah, blah. We already have it, is the irony of this one. Typically, what you will see in CI/CD scenarios, you'll actually use this button right here that says generate token. And then you can use that in your tool chains so that it's already out there and available as it's processing. So if you want to run some sort of test suite on this and it needs to have that access, you'll pass that token in as you're running your tooling and testing before you approve a PR or whatever.
Does this token ever change?
So it's specific to the machine and the browser. There's more details on what that actually means. I tried to refresh a bunch of different ways on my machine and it kept coming up the same. So I don't know if it's like MAC address based or like how they figure all of it, but it can change. Like if I go home to my other Mac, it's totally different than this one. So you'll see that it's still providing that back out. You can take it out now too. So if I were to take this out, because it already knows my machine, it should already be utilizing that too. I think I haven't double checked that, but now we're back up and running in localhost and protected on the front end too. So actually at this point, you should start to see this API call start to go from unverified requests back up to verified requests. I'm actually surprised we're getting a lot of invalid requests at this point, unless someone's like trying at home and already stealing the keys. I don't know. But yeah, so that's kind of all the pieces and parts of setting up App Check. Again, the uniqueness here being each domain. So you want to make sure like you put the correct domain in. When you're doing that, just be careful. Let me reopen it one more time. When you are providing this domain in here, I believe it does all subdomains as well. So just be careful when you add this in. Like you don't want to put star.web.app. That's not going to be a good thing. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these. You can add additional things. So like if you don't care if anyone is using localhost, you can actually put localhost in here, and then you don't have to go through that token validation piece as well. So it just depends on how you have that set up. And the demo went well, so I don't even need these slides, which is great. That's really all I have about App Check, but if there's any questions about App Check or Firebase or CodingCAD or